evening and welcome to Noirwich 2020 and the first live broadcast of Noirwich 2020. My name's Henry Sutton and I am the co-founder of the festival and also the course director of the MA in crime fiction at UEA. Now, this event is my favourite event of the festival because it features our brilliant students and graduates of the course. Premeditated is the brilliant work of all our graduates and our most recent graduates who you'll be hearing from shortly. They will be introduced by Julia Crouch, my colleague on the course, and you will hear from her again very shortly. The Noirwich Crime Writing Festival is a partnership between the National Centre for Writing and the University of East Anglia. Thank you to Arts Council England and to this year's festival supporters, Dead Good Books and the Crime Vault. You will hear from me at the end of this broadcast, but now I will hand over to Julia Crouch, author and colleague on the UEA MA in crime fiction.
Thank you, Henry. Welcome to the reading of the anthology. Last year, the launch was held in a pub just across the alley from my Norwich Airbnb. I like to sample a new one with each visit. This year, my bed for the night is even closer and a lot more familiar, being just across the garden from my writing shed here in my house in Brighton. It feels a little odd, I have to say, but I'm sure it's going to be wonderful as ever. This is the third year I've been visiting fellow on the UEA Crime Writing MA course, and once again I'm deeply impressed by the diversity and quality of the writing produced by our students. Crime writing is a broad church. Far from being just about cops and robbers, violence, action and entertainment, at its best it holds up a mirror to our world, urging us to examine the line between right and wrong and what leads people to cross it. The best crime fiction leans into the darkest and the noblest parts of humanity and can take us into all areas of society, from inner city council estate to remote Greek island, from outwardly innocent English suburbia to raw Australian outback. You'll find all of that in Premeditated and more. This is a demanding course. The bar for entry is high, the amount of work and commitment expected, great. But it needs to be like that because, as I know only too well, writing a novel is no easy enterprise. Yes, you need talent, skill, craft, imagination and determination to the point of bloody-mindedness. But you also need to be able to critically evaluate your work, to see it in the context of other writing so that you can figure out from premise to plot to paragraph to sentence what works and what doesn't. This is where this course comes into its own. Through detailed tutor and peer feedback, UEA crime fiction writers gain the support and skills they need for taking their novel from bright idea to a refined and considered 65,000 plus words. All novelists experience anxiety and or self-doubt. This is generally felt most acutely during the writing of the difficult middle section, the part where the transition of the perfect novel of your dreams, your novel baby, into something more flawed and real, your novel teenager perhaps, can cause you to question the whole project. It is also the part where many beginner writers lose heart and give up. This course provides students with professional tuition and feedback, but also, crucially, it makes a space to share problems and celebrate successes with peers, thereby fostering the ability to acknowledge these difficulties and to develop strategies for overcoming them. The challenges facing us this year and the end of last year are made all too apparent by the fact that we aren't enjoying tonight in a louche Norwich bar with dodgy snacks and warm book wine. Lockdown and whatever this is today has meant that we have all had to find new ways of working, and I, for one, am missing the social side of the termly residentials. For our students, it must be even worse. However, this course could have been built for such circumstances, with students coming from all over the world with all sorts of home and work responsibilities and commitments. The emphasis has always been on flexibility, and much of the one-to-one teaching is normally done remotely through online tools and video conferencing. We'll miss our nights on the tiles in Norwich, but the conversation will be just as good, and I hope the networking will happen anyway, online and through the various tools the university provides, whatever the future holds for IRL get-togethers. So here's to the class of 2020, working in your makeshift studies all over the world and beaming your work to us tonight. From kitchen table to tarted up garden shed, from ergonomic home office to sofa strewn with children's toys, to produce the great novels we are getting just a taste of here. The journey of the past 2 years has come to an end. The journey has just begun. And to begin tonight, I'm going to hand you over to Katie Behan.
Thank you, Julia. The piece, my book is called The Summer of Wasps. It's about a fledgling PI, Lily Dunn, who's hired to prove her childhood friend Sam, who's recently taken up with a cult-like group led by a troubled 90s indie star, is innocent of a woman's murder. She's just not sure that he is. The book explores the way that childhood experiences, good and bad, shape us as adults, and how difficult it is to break free of that, especially when we don't even know that we're trapped. The piece I'm reading is Lily drunkenly remembering when she first met Sam. Half an hour later, I realised that I was fully drunk. Not the sort where the room spins, but the kind that throws out random thoughts, a scatty overdrive that makes you dizzy. I lay down, eyes shut, hoping if I wished hard enough that I might sleep. Nice dreams, backpackers singing, talking about their travels. I loved that place. A flow of different people who knew nothing about me and cared even less. But my mind had designs on the past. The first time I met Sam and Ollie was 13. Sam and I 3 years younger, some theatre group that my nan made me attend. It'll be good for you to mix. Oh, there are some lovely children around. If they're so lovely, you go. She gave me a sandwich, kissed me and then threw me to the wolves. All the other kids knew who I was, who my dad was. I sat on the edge of the stage wishing the day was ending rather than starting. A boy appeared in front of me, skinny, small, messy brown hair, orange jumper, even though it was July. He smelt of strawberry chews. What? I asked him. Did you know that polar bears are really curious? So if you think you are going to get attacked by one, it's really good because all you have to do is throw something on the ground like a handkerchief, or if you haven't got a handkerchief, then maybe like a tissue. How would I know that? He shrugged. I asked again. How would anyone know that? A few feet away from us, 3 girls and a boy were laughing. One of the girls crept towards us. Her lips dripped gloss, her mouth smacked gum. The polar bear will stop to look at... She started speaking. The polar bear will stop to look at... She'd made her voice high and gentle in mimicry. The boy's left eye started to twitch slightly. It just gives you time to... It just gives you time to... Every time he spoke, she did her imitation, always a few words in the drag. The friends behind her were hysterical. The older lad especially, with his top-of-the-range skateboard gear. The entertainment only stopped when the youth worker came into the room. Now everyone, get into pairs. I told the boy he could work with me, and he beamed from ear to ear like it was the best news he'd ever had. Slipped his damp hand into mine. Later, in our biscuit and lemonade break, I asked him why he was wearing a woolen jumper. Because it's my favourite. Yeah, but you're sweating. Yeah, but it's still my favourite though. It was a logic I couldn't argue with. Skater boy and his groupie sneered at us from a distance. My new friends saw me looking. Yeah, that's my brother Ollie and his friend Hannah. Do you think we should throw a handkerchief on the ground? The boy looked serious. It only works on bears. Then another memory. My 11th birthday, a bright June day. The ice cream parlour in the nearest town, Dad eating a cone and laughing loudly at nothing, while my Nan stroked his arm. I watched them and my Sunday melted. Then we waved him off to London on the coach. Nan held my hand. It's just you and me again, love. I felt a bit dazed, like the sun from that day was shining in my eyes. I sat up, none of this. Checked an address on my phone, then slung some clothes on. Thank you. The next person is the brilliant Denise. Thank you.
Thanks, Bridget. This novel is called The Ravenous Tiger, and it's a retelling of William Shakespeare's Titus Andronicus, set in London in 9 years' time in the future. Chapter 1, London, October 12, 2029. Detective Chief Superintendent Tina Andrews picked up her gun. A body had been found in Red Zone 13, more than a routine stabbing by the sound of it. She slid the Glock Gen 9 into her belt, grabbed her jacket and went to round up a team. The central elite hub in Barbican House was too quiet. Soft murmurs replaced the usual buzz of voices, interrupted only by the half-hearted tapping of computer keyboards. Even the phones observed a mournful silence. I want your attention. 34 screen-bleached faces lifted to hers. City East have asked for our assistance in Red Zone 13. Mom? Rana? It's Tommy's funeral today. There was a collective sigh. I'm aware, Tina said, her voice tight, but until D.S. Ryan's coffin arrives at the church at 4 o'clock, you've got a fucking job to do. Rana shrank back into her seat. Tina scanned the room. Luke, you're with me. She shivered in the cold, dank air of the Barbican's underground car park. Her armed response vehicle was ready, a German SUV with high-level ballistic protection. She tossed the keys to Luke and settled herself into the passenger seat. The guards stood to attention, hands cradling their machine guns. One of them stepped into Silk Street to check the road was clear. Luke didn't wait, pulling out past the army tank situated at the main entrance to Barbican House. Their ARV almost clipped the guard and narrowly missed a squad car that was turning in. Like that is it, Tina said. Fucking tank, always stuck there on that blind bend. Piece of junk, they should dump it. Deterrent, Luke. Reminds people of the bad old days. Not like the unwashed masses are allowed down Silk Street, though, is it? True, but TV cameras are. He shrugged. Gonna hit the start of the march, Chief, he said. Shit, can you go round? Not till Finsbury Square. 2 minutes later, they were stuck behind a gaggle of early birds walking in the road, self-righteously oblivious to traffic. Their banners read, "No to death penalty," and "End this savagery," and "Support amnesty now." Luke hammered the horn. Most of the marchers shuffled to the pavements, but a young woman with long blue dreadlocks turned to face them, mulish feet planted square in the way. Her sign pictured a severed head, blood dripping. Tina heard her unspoken accusation whispered on the web that the police rounded up randomers in the street and sent them for execution. Luke slid down his window. Oi, you, out of the road before I arrest you for obstructing a police officer. Blue dreadlocks sauntered off and flipped the finger as they drove past. Fucking public order committee, he said. Fucking what about it, she said. She'd been on the committee. Letting people march like this again, why? Safety valve, Luke, better than flash riots, if you say so. What do you know? You weren't in the force during the emergency. She was wasting her breath, but she couldn't help herself. Thousands were killed, including coppers. Yeah, well, I should have stayed in the army. Coppers are dying now, and what do we do? Bugger all. Tina leaned forward to engage the drone monitor on the dashboard. A grainy picture appeared. A white square, the forensic tent. 10 or 11 police cars, 6 vans. White suits and yellow jackets crawled around like ants, too many to count. The green face of motion sickness leered at her and she tapped the screen off. See anything useful in that 5 seconds before you throw up your porridge oats? Said Luke with a sly grin. Scene's rammed. Parking this beast will be a bitch. You scrape another ARV and bye-bye Luke's bonus. Ouch. The commander says your team's unruly. Because I trashed a couple of squad cars. No, we're talking complaints from members of the public. Troublemakers, Luke said. I've backed you, but what? Lay off the heavy-handed routine, Tina said. I don't want a rep for police brutality. That's the end. I'm handing you over to Lucy Dixon.
Thank you, Denise. My book is called Choked, and it is about the horrors of online dating and how much you can trust a stranger's Tinder profile and whether you can be sure that they're really a stranger. Chapter 1, Kessingland, Tuesday, the 15th of May, 2012. Let me have a good look at you, Alice said, muting the telly and grabbing her phone to take a photo of her mum. Her golden retriever sprawled across her lap, opened one eye to see what was happening, and let out a sigh. Why are you taking my photo? Carrie asked, turning around and peering at herself in the mirror. I just want a record of what you're wearing, in case Tommy turns out to be an axe murderer, and I need to give a really good description to the police. Carrie picked up a cushion from the armchair and threw it at her daughter. This was your bloody idea in the first place. I hope you remember that if you're identifying my corpse. Mum, you've made him wait 5 weeks for this date. I can't imagine that a serial killer would be as patient. They're much more impulsive. There's nothing wrong with getting to know someone first, you know, Carrie said. Said Alice. But there's no point investing all this time in someone if you don't fancy them in person. Much better to find that out at the beginning, if you ask me. Oh, God, what if we don't fancy each other? Her mum replied. For fuck's sake, Mum, I am so bored with having this same conversation. Just go. Right, I'll be off now then. Carrie's eyes met Alice's again and she gave a nervous grin. Please stop worrying, Mum. You look amazing. He seems great. You've been chatting for years. Well, seems like years anyway. It will all be fine. And if he turns out to be a foot shorter or 10 years older than he said, just make your excuses and leave. It's really not a big deal. It was a big deal to Carrie, but she didn't want to go into it again. So she nodded and had a final look in the mirror above the fireplace to check that her hair, which she'd clipped up in what she hoped was an effortlessly sexy way, hadn't yet escaped the pins. Right, I'll see you later on. Don't forget to let Katniss out for a wee occasionally, she said, bending down to kiss the top of the dog's silky head and picking up her keys from the coffee table. Are you still here? Alice turned the telly back on, quashing another smirk and reaching down to stroke her dog's ears. 2 hours later, Carrie pulled her car back into Marham Mews and parked. It seemed like years ago that she'd left, but all the hope and excitement had drained away. She could think of nothing else aside from taking a large glass of vodka to bed and going to sleep. She didn't really want the inevitable post-mortem that she knew Alice was going to insist upon. She parked in her usual spot in the communal area shared by the small row of cottages and walked along the pavement, taking in a lungful of salty sea air. I take it didn't go very well then, called Alice as Carrie closed the door. Katniss was still dozing across Alice's lap and her tail thumped in a lazy welcome at Carrie's arrival. You could say that, she answered, slumping into the armchair and kicking off her shoes. Well, was he actually a pensioner? A pensioner would probably have turned up. What? He didn't show up? How long did you wait? Maybe he was stuck in traffic. Did you wait long enough? Calm down, Alice. I didn't chicken out. I waited an hour, which is twice what I think he deserves. Did you ring him? I tried. It wouldn't connect. He had texted to say he was running late. But now he seems to have blocked me on the app and his phone won't connect. He's blocked you? What the fuck? Can we talk about this tomorrow, Alice? I can't be arsed now. All I want to do is get into my PJs and cry myself to sleep. Alice could tell her mum was only half joking. They both paused, listening to Katniss noisily gulping water from her bowl in the kitchen, the metal tag of her collar clanging against the dish. Okay, so Tommy is an arsehole. That doesn't mean they all are, Mum. You've just had a bad start. Please don't let this put you off. Nobody finds someone great immediately on these apps. It takes a bit of whittling away the crap to get to the good ones. Whittling away the crap is definitely not how you sold this to me before. Carrie couldn't help laughing, despite the ball of disappointment that seemed to be sitting in her stomach. Alice laughed too. Pass me your phone, Mum. I think you should let me choose who you talk to. Alice, please. At least let me recover from one rejection before setting me up for another one. And that is it. And I will hand you over to Mark.
Thank you, Lucy. Hello, I am Mark Hankin. My story is based on true events that took place aboard the Polaris nuclear submarine HMS Repulse at the Clyde submarine base during the early hours of the 10th of October 1988. The motto of the submarine was, "Who touches me is broken," and this is also the title of my book. Chapter 1, Arrival. My name is Ken Sinclair, and this is my true story. I know where it ends, but it's a little harder deciding where to begin. If I were a movie director shooting the film of the book, I would open with a drone shot from on high. An elderly Volkswagen campervan winds along the side of a Scottish loch on a dreary autumn day to the soundtrack of Never Gonna Give You Up by Rick Astley. A caption appears on screen. Wednesday, the 5th of October, 1988, 1:35 p.m, 12 degrees Celsius, steady drizzle. Cut to exterior close-up through the windscreen. The wipers labour back and forth, clearing two interlocking semicircular areas of glass which frame the young occupants. He is driving. His hair is longer than is fashionable for the era. Despite the weather, he wears sunglass clip-ons over his spectacles. She also has big hair, a candy floss mane that's been afroed, backcombed and spiked, then the ends dyed blonde, the whole effect that of a starburst on firework night, or a small, adorable nuclear explosion. She wears heavy black eyeliner and mascara underneath chiseled Gothic eyebrows, like Susie from the Banshees. Her irises are a lovely hazel, which change colour depending on what she wears and the lighting. He and she have been lovers for 54 days. She will be missing, presumed dead, when the closing credits roll. Neither of them can guess at this as they approach their destination, singing alternate lines of the cheesy Rick Astley song. The campervan indicates, slows, and draws up outside the gates of a ramshackle caravan site by the roadside. He turns off the cassette player. She reaches into the glove box and takes out a pink felt drawstring bag. Let's start my story here. Chapter 2, Peace. I pull the campervan off the road, through the gates, and onto a bumpy forecourt of mud and sodden cinders. All seemed quiet, with no peace protesters in evidence. The steady Scottish drizzle must have sent them to ground. I applied the handbrake, cut the engine, turned to Sarah and snorted with laughter. "What's the joke, Maverick?" she said. "I still can't believe you did that to your hair. And now we have the earrings. Just following instructions. Blend in." She stuck out her tongue. "You look equally ludicrous in those shades." Definitely a Kodak moment. I reached for my Pentax, screwed on the self-portrait device, and we leaned together in our karaoke duet pose. Only then did I unclip my Top Gun aviators, and the scene outside acquired some muted colour. My first impression was of a South African township with wooden shacks, caravans, tarpaulins stretched between trees, rusty oil cans serving as rubbish bins or braziers, and massive cable reels on their sides as makeshift tables. A sign on painted corrugated metal sheets announced Faslane Peace Camp against a rainbow adorned with multiple CND symbols. Below this, a cartoon missile emerged from a submarine afloat in a loch. Hands of all colours reached out and Munch-like faces screamed, "No cruise, no Trident." A hand-painted sign on a shack read, "Information, legal support, visitors welcome." The door stood open and smoke puffed in a homely fashion from a flue jutting through the tin roof. I guess we check in there. We'd made it from London in 2 days, taking turns to drive, Sarah's Bon Jovi Rick Astley compilation at full volume. We stopped for the night in the lay-by between Carlisle and Gretna Green, where we heated a can of baked beans with frankfurters, brewed tea and smoked a joint before retiring to give the VW's suspension a good workout. We'd bought the camper from a Crocodile Dundee impersonator in the Caledonian Road for £350 in petty cash, doled out by the editor himself. I was falling in love with the old van, its hooded chrome headlights so like the eyelids of a forlorn but faithful hound, and I was already in love with Sarah. And now we go over to Helen.
Good evening. My novel is called Broken English. It's a story of a woman called Erin, whose son is kidnapped while the family are on holiday on the remote Greek island of Symi. She's also locked in a coercive relationship with her husband, Piers. The extract I'm about to read is taken from the midpoint of the novel, when Erin and Piers' tumultuous relationship is finally coming to a head. Erin stared out at the Greek countryside, the fireflies swarming, the sun glistening on their lace wings. "You just don't understand," she whispered, feeling the vibration of the engine as she rested her cheek on the window. "The only person who really understands is Nelson." "Nelson," Piers said. "So I am right about him. There is something going on between the two of you." He grabbed her wrist, squeezing it hard. "No, there isn't, and you're hurting me. Let me go." She opened the door and stumbled out before the car came to a stop. All she could think about was getting away from him. She ran straight ahead, and behind her, she heard Piers kill the engine. The car door slammed. He was coming after her. In front of Erin, there was an olive grove. Behind her, Piers was almost an arm's stretch away. She dug deeper, sprinted harder, and was getting away from him. But the other side of the olive grove was the edge of a cliff. There was nowhere to run. Piers caught up with her and shook her by the shoulders. "You're a fucking liar. You're having an affair." "No, I'm not." "I don't believe you." There was something different in his eyes. She couldn't make it out. In that moment, she no longer knew her husband. His eyes narrowed to slits, his mouth twisted. "Think you can make a fool of me, do you?" "No, But she couldn't finish her sentence. Piers shot out his right arm, got her by the neck, squeezing it tight and firm, his shovel-like hand on her slim neck. Then both hands, strangling her. Seconds passed, but it seemed like minutes. She had to do something. It was her fist under Piers' chin that stopped him. His head jerked back, teeth chinking, and he blew a bead of blood onto his chin. "Bitch," he mouthed, wiping the back of his hand across his bloodied chin. He lurched at Erin again, but she took a step back, catching her heel on the undergrowth. Together they fell on the rocks, Piers lying across her, heavy and clammy. "What have you done to me?" Piers said. That's when she saw it. His forehead was gashed, his face streaked with blood. He'd smashed it on the rocks. But it didn't stop him. He was like a man possessed, forcing her back, pinning her to the ground. With both hands around her neck, he strangled her, pressing hard. Erin panicked, scrabbling with her hands, searching in the grass for anything to stop him. Gripping a rock in her fist, she pounded it against her husband's temple. 1, 2, 3 times. Piers spat a spray of blood in Erin's face and slumped beside her. In his wrist, she felt his pulse beat slower, weaker, and slower still, until his head flopped to one side and he lay motionless. Her heart rose and fell. The hell had she done? The rock sitting in her palm was smeared with her husband's blood. Tears ran down her cheeks and gathered at her jawline. But she had to pull herself together. She needed to think straight. Kneeling beside Piers, she rolled him onto his back. His wounds made her want to retch, the cut on his brow, the gash on his temple, the split in his lip. Grass and earth stuck to the blood and gathered at the corners of his mouth. Piers was muscled and broad, a struggle for her to shift, but slowly, inch by inch, she slid his body along the grass until it was lined up with the cliff edge. This was it. 10 years of marriage ended on this cliff top in Greece. Erin rammed her hands under Piers' side, ready for the final push. But there was a piece about him that stopped her. Something in the upturn at the corner of his mouth reminded her of when they'd first met, the charm in his smile, the warmth of their first kiss. She bent in closer, tracing the creases around his eyes, the curl of his eyelashes, the childhood scar on his chin. She breathed in the familiar scent of his cologne, mixed with sweat and blood. Now, closer still, their noses nearly touched. And as her lips almost met his, Piers opened his eyes. I now hand over to the very talented Lynn Laversha.
I'm here. Hello, I'm Lynn Laversha, and I'm going to read the opening of my novel, A-Level in Murder. We move apart and lie side by side on the rumpled sheets. I turn my pillow over. It cools my neck. The August sun knifes through the gap in the dusty maroon curtains that don't quite reach the sill. The blade slices the dust on the chest of drawers around her old perfume bottles. She shifts. The bed springs creak. How about a cup of tea? I ask. Or we could. She touches me. There. I slide away from her. I sit on the side of the bed. She strokes my shoulder. She pulls me back down. We lie. Silent. A spider spins a thread from the lampshade in the afternoon sunlight. She reaches for my hand, pulls me towards her. Her finger traces the path left by a bead of sweat on my chest. Lying back, she sighs. Oh yes, tea would be lovely. I pull on my boxers, reach for my shirt. I'll stay here for a while. You should be working. She pulls the covers up. I feel her watching as I tug on my trousers. I turn. She yawns, stretches. I pick up her faded yellow silk kimono. I hand it to her. Sitting up, she takes it, covers her breasts. Change my mind. I'll get up and make her some supper. Spaghetti bolognese? Yes, please, Mummy. I read it again. Is that first page too shocking? I want you to be there alongside me. I've polished it as a novelist might, so you can experience every moment with me. Now, at the start of my college life, I've decided to write my memoirs and to share my unique story with you. Home educated, allowed to work on my talent without being distracted by school, now I'm ready. Ready to step on stage as a professional cellist. Mother and I have been preparing for this moment since I was 4 years old. In the college library, I found a book called A Life Worth Sharing, Write Your Memoir in 60 Days. In it, J.M. Rowe suggests opening with a hook, a piece describing a powerful event at the centre of your life story. Is my first page the J.M. Rowe hook? I see my memoir on a bookshop table. You walk in out of the rain in your lunch hour. You pick up my book, my story, and flutter through it. Casually, you read the first page, You reach the last line. You gasp. You're hooked. Rose right, it stays. Mother calls our special love cuddles. She needs them more now. Now I'm at college. You must be wondering about my father. He's gone. He left. I'm not sure why. She won't talk about it and goes quiet if I mention him. I can only remember a gigantic shadow with no features. There are no photographs. Mother was a concert pianist until she had me, then stopped. She married him, but didn't forgive him. After he left, I woke in her bed. It gives me great pleasure now to hand on to the lovely Lissa.
Sorry, I suppose I have to speak to make my picture come up, do I? I'm not sure if you can hear me, but I'll just go ahead anyway. Well, that's a tough act to follow from Lynn LaVersha, but I'll give it my best shot. So this is from my story, The Personal Liar. The story is set in Stuttgart in Germany, and it's about Peter, a young broke Brit, and his developing rather toxic relationship with the object of his obsession, Marcus Meyer, a burnt-out German influencer and a company heir. In this scene, chapter 3, Peter is trying to get some money out of his boss, Oliver, so he can hang out in the same places as Marcus Meyer and hopefully get to know him better. Oliver's small cherry red Smart was parked up behind a skip, and as his boss sat down, Peter saw the chassis drop. He shifted the printer paper box he'd been given to carry onto his hip, got in, and they darted off down the dark but not deserted city streets. So, Oliver said, if I lend you this money, how and when are you going to pay it back? I don't know the exact date, but it'll be from my first paycheck. Peter shifted the box on his knee. As I said, I need to get a suit for the interview. If all that stood between anyone and a company job right now was a cheap suit, Suits You would be opening more stores. He was right, but Peter didn't want to buy a suit. What he wanted was the kind of ready cash that meant he could hang out in some of the same places as Marcus Meyer. Oliver leaned on the wheel and the car cornered sharply. What company is it anyway? Meyer Co. Oh yeah? And who told you they were hiring? A friend, Peter said. Marcus Meyer? Oliver sneered. You don't know Marcus Meyer. He'd been expecting that response, and it was part of his plan. Peter took his phone from his pocket, and at the next red light, he held it up in Oliver's face. Oliver peered at the photo on Stranded's Instagram feed, the one of him and Marcus and the blonde woman sitting on a four-poster bed together. Oliver looked from the photo to Peter and back again. Probably he wanted to dispute it, but he couldn't. So you know the baby boss at Meyer Co. Good for you, but I'm still not going to lend you 200 euros. I might let you have some product if you think you can move it by Friday. Me? Sell Coke? Peter hadn't expected Oliver to offer him that. Thanks, but no. Why not? You know, I don't even do Coke. And that's why I'm offering it. Do you think I'd front it to you if you did? The light turned green and Oliver pulled away. It's not just that, Peter said. It's addictive and illegal, and it kills people. Pfft, more people die from paracetamol overdoses every year than from this stuff. If you can loan me the cash, Peter said, I'll repay you as soon as I get paid. It's not about the money, Peter. I need this stuff moved. But I'm not the right person for... I gave you a job, for God's sake, and a place to live when you came to me with your sob story. Oliver distorted his face into a grotesque dramatic mask. Poor orphan Peter, alone and abandoned. You Googled that, Peter said, looking away out of the window at the square concrete shape of the Liederhalle. I didn't tell you. You think I'd hire someone without doing my research? Oliver flexed his wide lips into a grin. Look, I'll help you if you help me. I'll front you 10 grams until Friday. If you charge 500 euros, you'll make 100 euros from that. The same again, and you'll have enough for a suit, a cheap one at least. Oliver braked slowly at a yellow light, and looking in the passenger side wing mirror, Peter saw why. There was a police car behind them. Did they follow us from the club? Oliver's voice sounded tight. They're just looking for drunk drivers, Peter said. I hope you're right. So come on, we're nearly home. What's your answer? I just got my residence stamp in my passport. You're not going to get caught, Peter. Sell to people you know, and if an undercover asks you for it, so what? They can't bust you. That's entrapment. Peter didn't think it was that simple, but he needed the cash. All right, fine, he said, through barely moving lips. And thank you. The police car behind them turned on its lights. Scheiße! Oliver gripped the small wheel tightly, but as the car sped past them, he began to laugh. They came to a halt outside a building heavy with oriel windows. It was a classic, desirable Stuttgart West property, and Oliver had inherited it from an aunt, but parking was limited. They turned in the street and, mounting the pavement, parked under someone's living room window, right next to a shiny new Mercedes. Okay, Oliver said, taking out the key. 10 grams for 400 euros, payable by Friday. Shake on it? He held his hand out. Peter looked at the meaty paw. Oliver was the only person he knew who still wanted to shake hands, and Peter was sure he did it just because it made people uncomfortable. But he leaned over and clasped it all the same. He didn't notice the sweaty dampness until he'd already reached for the car door. As he did, the plastic handle slipped out of his grasp, sending the door flying towards the Mercedes. Peter lurched after it and caught it, but knocked the box from his knee onto the floor outside. As the paper inside fluttered away, more contents fell out. 6 almost perfectly round, fist-sized white balls rolled towards the back of the car and stopped beneath the streetlight. Peter stumbled out of the car, and Oliver was around his sight in a heartbeat, but he just stood there, his hands waving up and down. Quick, he said, pick them up. If that cop car comes around the corner and they catch you with over 6 kilos of the shit, it's not entrapment. Peter dropped to his knees. With his heart thumping and his hands shaking, he herded the balls back into the box, careful to avoid leaving any fingerprints. And that's me. And next, I'm going to hand over to Amanda. Here we go. It's Amanda Parashi.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I'm just trying to get my video to work. Thank you very much, Lissa. So I'm going to be reading from a story that's set in the 1950s. It opens with a murder that's taken place of a man named Cecil Duckett, and his friends are very keen to find out what's happened to him. And one of his friends is a lady called Beryl Bridgens, and she was a prison warder in a prison during World War II. And that's how she knew Cecil Duckett, who was a solicitor. And she is very much keen to find out what's happened. So we're reading here from chapter 3. Throughout Saturday morning, Beryl had made strategic trips up and down the stairs to pass Cecil Duckett's door as policemen had traipsed in and out. They had tutted to themselves as they gave a running commentary on what they clearly considered to be a den of moral filth. Silk pyjamas, if you please, no flannelette here. Did you see the bookcase? Read poetry. Only drank foreign coffee in those poncy little cups. Wouldn't even get a good mouthful out of them. The inspector deigned to put in a personal appearance later in the afternoon. The constable had described Beryl to the inspector on their way up the stairs. His skivvy found him when she went to do for him in the morning, sir. Old girl lives upstairs with a couple of darkies. Bit touched, if you ask me. Wants to know all the gory details. Reminds me of that Frenchie in Dickens who sat knitting by the guillotine. From what I can gather, he picked her up in prison during the war. He did no such thing. Beryl spoke as if in direct response to the constable, defiant in her eavesdropping. We were professional colleagues. I was a prison warden and he was a solicitor to some of our guests. And I crochet. Beryl stood erect at the top of the stairs, giving the policeman a shock when they had turned the final corner to see her looming above them. My apologies, Madam, Inspector Pettigrew. This is Constable Ford. We meant no disrespect, just trying to get our facts in order. The inspector spoke with quiet authority. He accepted as his right Beryl's invitation to enter her home, where his large presence dominated. They entered immediately in Beryl's sitting room, the heating heart of her home. Evidence of her crocheting skills lay on every surface, from headrests on the ancient velvet sofa to a runner on the collapsible table. Across into the open-plan kitchen area could be glimpsed rainbow-covered crochet pan holders decorating the cream-tiled walls. Beryl offered the inspector the comfort of the overstuffed leather armchair, which he accepted and proceeded to sink ever deeper into. Constable Ford stood sullenly by the door, having conspicuously not been offered a seat by Beryl. Now, Mrs. Bridgens, Inspector Pettigrew continued in his practised friendly manner. You've given my men a very full description of how you found Mr. Duckett, and I certainly don't want to cause you any further distress. I was just wondering if you could give us any information on any guests that your employer may have had over the past few days. Beryl sat across from him on one of her dining chairs, eschewing the sofa as she had not wished to sink low on her old springs in front of her visitors. She considered her answer as she poured tea for the inspector, deliberately ignoring the constable who stood behind her. Mr. Duckett was a very quiet, considerate gentleman. He did not do anything to bring attention to himself or disturb his neighbours, and I never had any cause to take note of comings and goings in his flat. I understand, the inspector said as he accepted his tea and helped himself to a sultana slice. I just wondered whether you happened to see any ladies or indeed gentlemen entering the residence, perhaps later in the evening. He raised his eyebrows in a knowing way as he spoke, displaying to Beryl all the subtlety of a Victorian music hall artiste. Thank you. So I'm now going to hand over to Paul Stone.
Am I on? Hello? I don't know if I'm on or not, but I'm going to start talking. So my name is Paul Stone, and I want you to imagine the most beautiful super yacht in the world, 80 meters long, $80 million of sheer indulgence, and it's in the British Virgin Islands, arguably the most beautiful spot in the Caribbean. That's the setting of this scene, specifically the owner's suite. It features the two central characters of my novel, number one, which deals with money laundering, corruption and gangsterism. The two characters are Natalia, a 28-year-old London lawyer, a Russian lawyer working for a billionaire, who's also been having an affair with him, and Danny, a young Londoner, an ambitious Londoner and quite talented, with whom she's started an affair. They're both there to conclude a deal they think will change their lives. He's been sent home from the yacht after they were with Natalia because of the arrival of Natalia's boss, Nikolai, a misogynist bastard, frankly. And since then she's had a torrid time, and Nikolai has assaulted her, unknown to Danny. Unknown to Natalia, Danny's been watching on the spy cams he'd planted on the yacht because he was afraid of Nikolai and what he might do. And he's swimming there and has just arrived on the yacht. Natalia sat hunched on the edge of her bed. She was totally still. Her head was in her hands. Her hair was a mess. Her bra seemed to have been ripped from her body. There were scratches on her back. There was no sign of Nikolai, but his trousers and boxers were in a heap on the floor. Natalia. I knelt down in front of her. I held her hands and looked into her eyes. I noticed Gara. It was smeared around her face, along with her tears, along with her blood. Danny? Very strange. Her eyes were manic, but she was totally calm. There was a lump on her forehead, a bruise on her cheek, and a cut just above the bridge of her nose. Are you okay? She blinked her eyes, like she was trying to work out if I really was there. Danny? Where the fuck is he? Huh? Where the fuck is he? I'm going to kill him. Her head shook itself. She held up her hand. I lost my nail. You have to get it back. I rocked back up onto my feet. She'd gone mad, sitting there, battered after death, and all she was worried about was one false fingernail. It was my special one, the one with the diamond. I looked around the room. The huge duvet was in a pile on the floor under the bed. There was blood on the sheet. Natalia's glass was on the credenza. I fetched it for her and told her to drink. She took a big gulp and handed it back. Do you want some more? Yes. I poured a large scotch, lots of ice. I handed it to her, then went to the bathroom and found a towel and another bathrobe. I wrapped a pile of ice cubes in a towel and went back to her. Here. I helped her into the bathrobe and held the ice pack to her head. Where is he? She nodded towards the duvet. I pointed at it. Under there. She nodded. I didn't want to see him. I think he might have passed out from the pain. I pointed at the blood on the bedsheet. Please tell me some of this is his. Her eyes widened into a kind of mad stare. I don't understand why a man committing rape would demand oral sex. Nikolai's dick was still attached to his body, which was actually a relief. There were 5 wounds along its puny length, one for each fingernail of hand. They were all bleeding slowly, but there must have been fountains when he was fully erect. God, I was glad she hadn't bitten it off. He was snoring loudly, flat out on the floor. He still had his shirt on, but his bottom half was completely naked. His legs were splayed out. Somewhere down there, buried between his 2 obese thighs, was the goal of my search. I looked up at Natalia. You better want this thing really badly. Get on with it before he wakes up. Okay, but if he does wake up when I'm down there, you show him the steak knife and tell him if he moves, I'm going to use that to get the nail out. I knelt down and pushed Nikolai's legs further apart so I could crawl between them. I was bang on certain to come eye to eye with, well, some eye that I never wanted to be eye with. Not anyone's, for sure not a guy's, and at least of all not his. But sooner or later I'd have to get on with it. That's what I did. I eventually got his legs wide enough apart to find his scrotum. No wonder he'd passed out. The thing was blue. The stench made me gag. I could only see 3 wounds in it, all of them deep, all seeping blood. None of them seeming to be wearing any jewellery. There was only one thing for it. I lifted it up. It was damp to the touch. There was the nail, just round the back. There was only one problem. I looked up at Natalia, whose stare was fixed on Nikolai's face. You got any tweezers? I took a firm grip on the nail with the tweezers and gave it a tug. It came out with a pop. I raised it in the air like it was the Premier League trophy. The diamond was smeared with Nikolai's blood. Good, said Natalia. Go and wash it and I'll give you a kiss. I gave her a look. I told you, my lips were never closer than 6 inches away. Thank God for that. Now I'm iffy. She pecked me on the lips. I went to the bathroom. When I came out again, Nikolai was groaning. I'll call Gavin, I said. No, keep an eye on Nikolai. There's something I have to do before that. And now I'm going to hand over to the fabulous Aussie Emma Stiles.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, my name's Emma Stiles. It's quite hard to follow that. That was great. So yeah, I'm reading from my story, No Country for Girls. It's an Australian outback crime road trip story told from the point of view of 3 young women on the run with a load of stolen gold. So this is an extract from the 3rd chapter. It's flat dark, no lights. A circle of dead trees spears out of the water, black against black, layers of frog sounds, the smell of tea tree over the stink of mud. Something invisible flaps across and lifts the hairs on my arms, a crow or a black cockatoo. I throw the phone and it spins end on end until I hear the splash. I'm close enough to home to have lost it here for it not to seem strange if someone checks. I wipe my eyes and I'm wiping my mouth as I come out of the scrub near the car, a flapping rush of panic when I see Charlie. What are you doing? What do you reckon? The back of the ute is down, the interior light spilling out of the rear window. She's backed it up to the water on a short square of jetty and got the body half out. No, I rush and grab the end she's pulling and try and push it back. We had a plan. So I changed it. He can go in the lake. We're here, all right? We'll weigh it down like we said. No, you can't do that. I lift and push, but she's stronger. How can she be stronger? We have to get him back in. Stick to the plan. The lake's too small. The body shifts, awkward and heavy, and I let it go. There's not enough jetty between me and the water. The head part lolls off the end of the ute and looks exactly like what it is. She climbs up into the tray. You got eyes in your head? See how dark it is. We can do it here. I look at the trees against the sky, the outline of stars. It's dark everywhere. Not down the beach. There'll be lights and fishing. They'll be fishing down at Woodman's. We should have thought of that. She drags the other end of the body around and then the bag of gravel, scraping against the metal tray. Not in the middle of the night. Yes, tomorrow morning, Monday. You don't know everything. Why do you think you do? We should have thought of it. I lean against the end of the ute and press the heels of my hands into my eyes. When I pull them away, she's still there. Why couldn't you have waited for me? It's not far to the beach. Even the river is better. No, it's not, Charlie says. You don't know every fucking thing. People out in boats, fishing, surfing, fucking surf lifesaving. Here, there's going to be no one. A couple of dog walkers, if that. She gets the bag of gravel to the edge of the ute. I think of my phone, all those messages a few meters away. We can't put him in there. I've just thrown up in the water. My DNA is in there. She plants her fists on her hips. I don't care if your whole fucking dinner is in there. Both our fingerprints are all over this tarp in case you hadn't noticed. Now either fucking help me or get out the way. She puts a foot on top of the bag of gravel. No, I will not do either of those things. I brace myself against the gravel, glance behind at the water. Do you have to say F every second sentence? Can't you think of anything else? She goes quiet and there's a moment I think we're in for a fight. I should probably be scared of her. Why aren't I scared of her? But she snorts out a laugh. Can't you say fuck? Too posh. Don't be ridiculous. Stand back. She shoves with her foot and the bag of gravel lurches and I can't stop it. Charlie, I scramble to the side. The bag hits the jetty and then the body does. She's tied the two things together. Crunch, jerk, slither. The rope looping and tightening and then all of it gone off the edge. 2 splashes. I don't know whether to be impressed or terrified. A flock of corellas wheels out of the dark. Thank you. And I'm handing over to the wonderful Martin.
Thank you very much, Emma. Wasn't that fantastic? We really need an applause button on this video. It is a huge honour to be reading alongside such a talented group of writers. This course has been fantastic, and thank you for some really outstanding teaching. And a really massive thank you to all my fellow students who I've learned a huge amount from. Thank you very much. So Orange 612 is a high-tech thriller told from the point of view of two main characters in alternating chapters. My classmates have heard quite a bit about Cal, so I think I might start with chapter 2, which is Zed's opening chapter. In chapter 1, Cal hacked a bank account, stole £13.72 and got thrown out of a window. Chapter 2, Zed shimmies past the grid of flat screens, which cover most of the longest wall. He's a smooth mover with little pops of arms and legs bouncing to the rhythm of some funky beats, which are pumped out by the laptop on his desk. The whole building is so silent, always so utterly silent, that even built-in speakers feel loud. His desk sits against the short cross wall separated from it by stacks of server boxes, all perforated metal, crisscross cables, flashing LEDs. Sometimes Zed imagines that the tiny lights are synced in with his tunes. It's a dead dull room, but he's used to it, and the log oblong of oat-coloured carpet is firm underfoot, so it's good for dancing on. The black painted ceiling's a bit weird, making it hard to see much beyond the cheap suspended lights, and there are no windows. No daylight ever penetrates, but of course that makes little difference when, like now, it's the middle of the night. A bump. Zed twists to see, thinks the sound was something in the music, a clever use of stereo, that's all. Zed lets go his breath. He's still bent to look behind himself and catches his reflection. He's rocking faded jeans and t-shirt and looking pretty hot for someone who's dancing in the early hours of the morning past a big wall of computer screens. Great arse. Zed turns to fully face his reflection. The whole wall opposite is glass and acts like a giant mirror because the room beyond is dark. It's a large open-plan office and never used. Zed pulls some shapes, rides the wave, he smiles, fit, got moves. He's maybe a little pale from all this never seeing the sun stuff, but his hair is loose and how he likes his curls. He's listening to Andre 2000. Spiky, twisted, fast. Zed eyes his double in the mirror as he performs a staccato kind of moonwalk backwards from the desk. He laughs. The flat screen behind him, nearest to the corner and second up, catches his attention because it's changing. Each display in this gridded wall shows the latest statement from a different bank account, different number, different name. This one happens to be opening a fresh one after logging out the old. Zed doffs an imaginary cap, impressed by the efficiency. He wrote the script himself. He scans the statement. It's not been personalised in over 2 weeks. The listed transactions are only the regulars: direct debit, standing order, mortgage payments, utilities, and of course the ubiquitous transfer to savings, where the money really goes. Zed's here to add the personal touches, based on details from the account holder's biography, and these too are brought up by his software in a small window on the right side of the screen. He chuckles as he reads, then says, "Why, Mr. Johnson, you've been quiet, and we both know that can't be true, because really, you are a very naughty boy." He touches the screen to stop it auto-logging out. Let's transfer some cash from, Zed inspects the neighbouring display, from Mrs. Jones. A bank statement in that name. Zed taps the screen to open the payment window. Here we go, 40 quid. Will that cover it? Zed writes, "For services rendered," in the payee reference box. He types directly on the screen, all made slightly harder by his constant bouncing to the groove. You're so cheap, Johnson. Zed hits submit, and then, because the scatterlights are playing, he skanks his way the full length of the room and back again. No need to feel depressed. Everything's going well. His latest plan is working. And just because Martin wants to see him in the morning, that doesn't make it all bad news. In fact, it's a good sign. Martin will want changes, and that's precisely what Zed needs. So what if he's fallen behind schedule? It's hardly surprising, given everything he's asked to do by everyone. Zed can fix this. One all-nighter's not a problem. He does without sleep all the time. 1 or 2 all-nighters. He grins and sniffs and runs a finger past her nostril. No problem. He'll be done by dawn. Zed's job is to execute small, believable transactions between thousands of different accounts spread across a range of banks. He's good at it because he makes it fun, And that makes him creative and keeps him going when it's dull. That, plus the need to keep from being killed. And that's me done. And I'm handing over to Lynn again, you lucky things. We get Lynn twice, but here she's masquerading as Lucy. I'll let her introduce that to you. Goodbye and thank you.
Thank you, Martin. I'm honoured to read the opening of Holloway by Lucy Wood, who couldn't get out of working this evening. Kit was almost at the kettle when she heard something. She faltered mid-step and stopped fiddling with her dressing gown cord to listen better. Nothing but the dog's meaty breathing and her own. She shrugged, and the tap spluttered as she turned it on. Wilson started up from his basket, myopic eyes roaming the room, and seeing no cause for alarm, slumped back down, lids closed. Moving more quietly, Kit stretched away another interrupted night's sleep. She felt pops in her joints and relaxed as the ache in her neck ached. As the kettle juddered to a boil, she tossed a tea bag into a mug and poured, no milk, then lit a cigarette, balancing it between her fingers to release the door bolts. A whoosh of air distributed a stack of papers on the table. Work stuff, nothing important. And she rested against the frame, goosebumps puncturing her forearms under the insubstantial fluff of the dressing gown. Standing puddles in the yard had iced over during the night, and gossamer webs looped ornamentally on the hawthorn. Habitually, Kit scanned the perimeter of the yard once, twice, and was satisfied. It was encouragingly still. One of those tricksy January days that con the birds into thinking spring had arrived. Winter rarely saw a bright morning. Today, though, the sky was translucent, like running water. She drew on the cigarette and the tip pulsed orange, nicotine sweet on her tongue. She leaned against the doorframe, deliciously faint from holding on to that first inhalation far too long, raised her chin and sniffed the morning. The tang of smoking wood from the fire she'd set in the living room, the muddy scent of the empty henhouse, and snow. Snow was coming. The sound was distinct this time and unmistakable. The yard gate was swinging on its hinges as if someone had just left or just arrived. Her grip on the mug loosened. How had she missed that? She ran, leaving the door wide open, ignoring the smash of china as the mug shattered on the step behind her. At the gate, she skidded to a stop in flimsy slippers and scanned the ground for the padlock, which should have been holding the gate fast. It wasn't there. Careful not to touch, she stepped closer and inspected the electrified cord woven through the bars. It was severed from the power supply. Caught in a gust of wind, the gate moved and she jerked away. Another clang, quieter this time, and there was the padlock, swaying uselessly on the top bar between curls of barbed wire. Kit moved in a circle, searching for more signs of intrusion. The potholed lane leading to the village was empty, as usual. The walls, head height and capped with a lethal combination of glue and glass, glistened with frost. Only the gate, the first in a line of defences, electrified as a warning to would-be thieves and ritually secured each evening, was altered. She recalled the satisfying click of the padlock, the low buzz of electricity feeding the wire, and shooing Wilson inside and away from the chill of the night air. She remembered clearly the moon hanging low over the trees. A throbbing sensation snapped her back to the present. She unclenched her fist, surprised, as the forgotten cigarette fell to the cobbles, crushed out of shape. A blister was blooming in the centre of her dusty palm. She exhaled, using the sting of it to tune into the scene around her. Nothing else seemed out of place, and yet Kit couldn't make sense of it. There was something. She was certain. The farmhouse's cracked roof tiles blushed in the emerging sun. The kitchen window was cloudy with condensation, the shape of a vase of flowers on the sill just about visible. Blue smoke hung in ropes above the living room chimney, and there was a flash of movement as one of the yard cats rounded the corner. The animal momentarily froze at the sight of her, then slunk off, past the closed back door and away, flicking its feral tail. The closed back door. Kit ran. Wow, Lucy, that was lovely. Now I hand over to the wonderful Henry.
I'm going to clap because the Zoom video conferencing platforms for literary festival events miss one thing, and that is the audience, the sound of an audience enjoying what they're hearing. I've enjoyed it hugely. I'm going to clap again. And I hope all of you, where you're listening from, are also clapping. It's been a great privilege to listen to this work and to see this work develop over the last 2 years. So thank you, Katie. Thank you, Denise. Thank you, Lucy Dixon. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Lucy Wood, read by Lynn. It's hugely appreciated. And what's also absolutely, of course, fundamental to this endeavour is that the anthology, Premeditated, is published by Eggbox Publishing, which is part of the UEA Publishing project. And you can find and buy your copies, and please do, because this is so important, from www.eggboxpublishing.com. I'd also like to thank Julia Crouch for her brilliant introduction to the anthology, which you can also read more of in Premeditated. And I'd like to thank Martin from Brief Media for handling the tech, and particularly my colleagues at UEA, Sophie Scott and Molly Taylor, for doing a brilliant job of organising this event this evening. And of course, our partners in Noirwich, National Centre for Writing, without whom so many people worked so hard to bring this festival to you. And yes, it is an online festival, but you know, at least we can listen to these events again. They will be online for some time. So please do check back. And also, and particularly, bear in mind tomorrow, we have 2 fantastic events will be broadcast and released for publication. We have Jill Dawson, the brilliant writer most recently of the novel The Language of Birds, and previous to that, the crime writer, which featured, of course, Patricia Highsmith. She will be in conversation with Trevor Wood, a graduate of the MA Creative Writing Crime Fiction, the very first cohort, and his first novel, The Man on the Street, came out earlier this year, and it's zooming up the bestseller charts. It's had incredible reviews, and it's been shortlisted for the Silver Dagger. So this is where it's happening. We have heard, of course, of the voices of not just today, but the voices tomorrow. So do please look out for Premeditated. Do please buy it. Do please engage with these writers, because you'll be hearing a lot more from them in the future. Thank you very much for listening and tuning in this evening. Thank you all.